A family vanished in the Sierra Nevada. 2 years later, scientists found a startling discovery. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Sierra Nevada wilderness as Dr. Marcus Holloway adjusted his acoustic equipment one final time. His wife, Elena, was rolling up their sleeping bags while their 15-year-old daughter, Sophie, sat cross-legged on a flat rock, sketching the mountain peaks in her journal. "Dad, why do you always bring so much weird stuff on our camping trips?" Sophie asked, watching her father fiddle with what looked like a sophisticated microphone attached to a digital recorder. Marcus smiled, his eyes lighting up the way they always did when discussing his work. "This weird stuff might revolutionize how we understand mountain acoustics, sweetheart. Sound waves behave differently at altitude, especially in rocky terrain like this." Elena looked up from packing, a gentle warning in her voice. "Just remember we're here to spend time together, not conduct experiments." "Of course," Marcus replied, though his fingers were already dancing over the device's controls. "But listen to this." He pressed a button, and a low-frequency tone echoed across the canyon. The sound seemed to hang in the air longer than it should have, bouncing off the rock walls in strange, overlapping patterns. Sophie frowned. "That sounds weird. Like it's coming from inside the mountain." "Exactly." Marcus's excitement was infectious. "These limestone formations create natural acoustic chambers. I've been developing a theory about resonant frequencies in mountain ranges. If I'm right, we could use sound waves to map underground cave systems, find trapped miners, even predict rock slides." The device beeped, and Marcus checked the display. His eyebrows shot up. "That's odd. The frequency response is much stronger than my calculations predicted." Elena walked over, concern creeping into her voice. "Marcus, maybe we should head back. The weather forecast mentioned possible storms." But Marcus was already absorbed in his readings, making rapid notes in a waterproof notebook. "Just a few more tests. Look at these resonance patterns. They're unlike anything I've recorded before." Sophie stood up, suddenly uneasy. "Dad, the sound is making my ears feel funny." Marcus barely heard her. He was adjusting the frequency higher, watching the digital display with fascination. "The rock structure here must be more complex than the geological surveys indicated. These readings suggest massive hollow spaces beneath us." The next tone he played was higher, sharper. It seemed to cut through the air like a blade, and somewhere deep in the canyon walls, something answered back. A low, rumbling vibration that seemed to come from the mountain itself. Elena grabbed Marcus's arm. "Stop. Something doesn't feel right." But Marcus was in full scientist mode now, his mind racing with possibilities. "Elena, this could be groundbreaking. If these frequencies can penetrate this deep into the rock, imagine the applications for search and rescue operations." He increased the frequency again. This time, the responding vibration was stronger, and small pebbles began to rain down from the canyon walls above them. Sophie pointed upward, her voice tight with fear. "Dad, look!" A hairline crack had appeared in the rock face directly above their campsite, spiderwebbing outward with each pulse of Marcus's acoustic device. "Marcus!" Elena shouted, but her husband was staring at his equipment in disbelief. "This is impossible," he muttered. "The frequencies shouldn't be strong enough to affect solid rock structure. Unless..." His face went pale as understanding dawned. "Unless the limestone has been weakened by centuries of water erosion, creating a network of microfractures that amplify the resonance." The mountain groaned around them, a deep, ominous sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Elena grabbed their emergency backpack while Sophie clutched her journal. "We need to get out of here. Now!" Marcus finally turned off the device, but it was too late. The damage was done. The acoustic frequencies had found the mountain's weak point, and like a tuning fork struck at precisely the right note, the entire rock face began to sing with destructive harmony. "Run!" Marcus shouted, snatching up his recorder and notebook. They sprinted toward the narrow canyon exit, but the mountain was faster. With a roar that drowned out all other sound, thousands of tons of limestone broke free from the canyon wall. The rock slide moved like a living thing, flowing down the mountainside with terrifying speed and power. Marcus pushed his family toward a small overhang, the only shelter within reach. They dove beneath the rocky outcrop just as the avalanche swept over them, sealing them in darkness. In the sudden, suffocating silence that followed, Marcus's voice recorder continued to run, faithfully documenting every sound, including his own horrified whisper. "God help us! What have I done?" The device's green LED blinked steadily in the darkness, its solar panels still catching faint traces of light filtering through gaps in the rubble. It would continue recording for days, then weeks, then months, powered by whatever sunlight could penetrate their rocky tomb. Above them, the search parties would find only an empty campsite and scattered gear. The Holloway family had vanished as completely as if the mountain had swallowed them whole. Which, in a way, it had. The voice recorder kept its silent vigil, waiting in the darkness with its terrible secret, the complete documentation of how a father's scientific curiosity had become his family's doom, and how the very frequencies meant to save lives had instead taken 3. But the mountain keeps all secrets, and some discoveries are too dangerous to be found. At least, that's what everyone believed for the next 2 years. Sheriff Tom Bradley had seen plenty of missing person cases in his 30 years of law enforcement, but the Holloway disappearance stuck with him like a thorn he couldn't pull out. 3 days after the family failed to return from their camping trip, he stood at their abandoned campsite, staring at the scattered remains of what should have been a peaceful family vacation. "It doesn't make sense," he muttered to Deputy Sarah Chin, who was photographing the scene. "Look at this setup. They were organized, prepared. These aren't the kind of people who just wander off and get lost." The campsite told a story, but it was one with missing pages. Their tent was still pitched perfectly, guy lines taut and stakes secure. Elena's coffee mug sat on the camp table, still half full and stone cold. Sophie's art supplies were arranged neatly on a flat rock, her sketchbook open to a half-finished drawing of the canyon walls. But the family's backpacks were gone, along with their emergency supplies and some of Dr. Holloway's research equipment. "Maybe they went for a day hike and got turned around," Deputy Chin suggested, though her voice carried doubt. Bradley shook his head. "The weather was perfect that day. No storms, good visibility. And look at this." He pointed to fresh footprints in the dirt leading toward the narrow canyon. They were heading deeper into the gorge, not back toward the trailhead. The search team had been combing the area for 72 hours. Helicopters circled overhead, their rotors echoing off the canyon walls. K-9 units had followed scent trails that seemed to vanish at the base of the cliff face. Mountain rescue teams rappelled down rock faces and explored every cave entrance they could find. Nothing. It was as if the family had simply evaporated into the thin mountain air. On the 4th day, Search and Rescue Coordinator Jake Morrison called Bradley over to a rocky outcrop about 200 yards from the campsite. "Sheriff, you need to see this," Morrison said, his weathered face grim. "We found something." Wedged between 2 boulders, partially hidden by fallen pine needles, was a small digital device. Bradley recognized it immediately from the missing person report, Dr. Holloway's voice recorder, the one his wife had mentioned he always carried during his research trips. "It's damaged," Morrison pointed out. "But it might still work. The casing is pretty tough." Bradley turned the device over in his hands. The solar panel on top was cracked, and the metal casing bore deep scratches, as if it had been scraped against rock. But the power indicator still showed a faint green light. "We need to get this to the lab," Bradley said. "Maybe it'll tell us what happened to them." Back at the station, IT specialist Maria Santos worked for hours trying to access the recorder's files. The device had been encrypted with a password that none of them knew, and the file system appeared to be corrupted. "I can see there are audio files on here," Santos explained to Bradley. "But they're locked behind some kind of academic security protocol. Dr. Holloway must have used university-grade encryption to protect his research data. Can you break it?" Santos shook her head. "Not without specialized software. We need to send this to the FBI's Digital Forensics Unit, and even they might not be able to crack it without the password." Bradley felt his frustration mounting. The one piece of evidence that might explain what happened to the Holloway family was sitting right in front of him, but it might as well have been locked in a vault. The search continued for 2 more weeks. National Guard units joined the effort. News crews arrived from Sacramento and San Francisco, turning the tragedy into a media circus. The story made national headlines. Family of 3 vanishes in Sierra Nevada wilderness. But as days turned into weeks, hope began to fade. The official search was scaled back, then suspended. The case was reclassified from a rescue operation to a recovery mission, then finally to a cold case investigation. Dr. Marcus Holloway, Elena Holloway, and Sophie Holloway were added to the growing list of people who had simply vanished into America's wilderness, their fate unknown and their story unfinished. The voice recorder was filed away in evidence storage, its secrets still locked away behind digital walls that no one could breach. The official report concluded that the family had likely gotten lost in the rugged terrain and succumbed to the elements, their bodies carried away by mountain streams or scattered by wildlife. It was a neat, clean explanation that satisfied bureaucrats and insurance companies. But Sheriff Bradley never quite believed it. Sometimes, late at night in his office, he would pull out the case file and stare at the photos from the campsite. Something about the whole situation felt wrong, like a puzzle with pieces that didn't quite fit together. The mountain, however, kept its secrets. And the Holloway family became just another tragic statistic in the long history of people who walked into the wilderness and never walked back out. At least, that's what everyone assumed until 2 years later, when a team of scientists arrived with equipment sophisticated enough to hear the mountain's buried secrets. Dr. Amanda Rivers had never heard of the Holloway family when she first proposed the Sierra Nevada field test to the National Science Foundation. She was too focused on her revolutionary acoustic mapping technology to care about old missing person cases. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. "Are you sure this is the right location?" asked Dr. Kevin Park, her research partner, as he wrestled with the heavy equipment case up the rocky trail. "This place gives me the creeps." Amanda consulted her GPS coordinates for the 3rd time. "This is it. The geological survey data shows this canyon has the perfect rock composition for testing our system. Dense limestone with natural fractures, ideal for subterranean acoustic mapping." Their project was ambitious: develop a new type of long-range acoustic detection system that could locate survivors trapped in landslides, collapsed buildings, or cave-ins. Traditional ground-penetrating radar was limited by depth and rock density, but their prototype could theoretically use sound waves to map hidden spaces hundreds of feet underground. "Think about it," Amanda had explained to the grant committee months earlier. "Every year, people die in disasters because we can't find them fast enough. Earthquake victims trapped in rubble, miners caught in cave-ins, avalanche survivors buried under snow. Our acoustic mapping system could save thousands of lives." The 3rd member of their team, graduate student Tyler Chin, was already setting up the main array when Amanda and Kevin reached the test site. The equipment looked like something between a telescope and a satellite dish, a complex array of sensors and transmitters designed to send sound waves deep into the earth and analyze the echoes that bounce back. "The baseline readings are weird," Tyler reported, adjusting the frequency settings. "I'm getting interference patterns that don't match the geological models." Amanda frowned, checking the computer display. "Interference from what? We're miles from any power lines or radio towers." "I don't know," Tyler said. "But look at this." He pointed to a series of waveforms on the screen. "These acoustic signatures suggest there are hollow spaces in the rock, but the geological survey said this area was solid limestone." Kevin unpacked the transmission equipment. "Maybe the survey was wrong. Rock formations can be more complex than they appear on paper." Amanda activated the primary scanning array. The system sent out a low-frequency pulse that seemed to vibrate through the ground beneath their feet. Seconds later, the receivers picked up the returning echoes, and the computer began building a 3-dimensional map of the subsurface. "That's impossible," Amanda whispered, staring at the display. The skin revealed a complex network of voids and chambers hidden within the canyon walls. But more disturbing were the artificial signatures, geometric patterns that suggested human-made objects buried deep in the rock. "There's something down there," Tyler said, his voice tight with excitement. "Something that shouldn't be there." Amanda adjusted the frequency higher, focusing the scan on the largest void. The computer processed the data, and gradually, a clearer picture emerged. About 40 feet below the surface, sealed behind what appeared to be a recent rockfall, was a chamber containing several distinct objects. "Metal," Kevin observed, studying the density readings. "And what looks like organic material." Amanda felt a chill run down her spine. "We need to contact the authorities. If there are human remains down there." "Wait," Tyler interrupted, pointing to another section of the scan. "Look at this. The rockfall pattern isn't natural. These fractures are too regular, too symmetrical. It's like something caused a very specific type of collapse." Amanda studied the data more carefully. The acoustic signatures were telling a story, one of sound waves bouncing through the rock in unnatural patterns, creating resonance points that had weakened the limestone structure. "My God!" she breathed. "This wasn't an accident. Something triggered this collapse." Kevin looked confused. "What do you mean?" "The frequency patterns," Amanda explained, her scientific mind racing. "Look at the residual acoustic signatures in the rock. Someone was using sound waves down here. High-frequency acoustic testing, just like what we're doing now." The implications hit them all at once. Someone else had been conducting acoustic experiments in this exact location. Someone whose work had gone catastrophically wrong. "We need to call the police," Amanda said firmly. "And we need to find out what's in that chamber." As if responding to her words, the computer chimed with a new discovery. The deep scan had detected something else, a small electronic device, still emitting a faint signal after all this time. "It's got a power source," Tyler reported in amazement. "Solar charging. Whatever's down there has been running for years." Amanda stared at the canyon walls with new understanding. This wasn't just a test site anymore. It was a crime scene. And somewhere beneath 40 feet of rock and rubble, the answers to a 2-year-old mystery were waiting to be uncovered. Sheriff Bradley had aged in the 2 years since the Holloway disappearance. The unsolved case had haunted him, and when Dr. Rivers called about discovering human remains in the exact area where the family had vanished, he felt a mixture of relief and dread. "You're telling me they've been down there this whole time?" Bradley asked, watching the excavation team set up their equipment. Amanda nodded grimly. "Our acoustic mapping shows 3 distinct signatures that match human remains, plus various personal effects. The chamber is sealed, but we can create a controlled access point without disturbing the scene." The excavation was delicate work. Using precise acoustic guidance, the team drilled a narrow shaft down through the rockfall, creating a camera port to survey the chamber before full excavation began. When the first images came back, the silence was deafening. "Jesus," whispered Bradley. The chamber was small, maybe 8 feet by 12 feet, with a ceiling barely high enough for a person to stand. In the center, 3 sleeping bags were arranged in a neat row. Personal belongings were scattered around the space: a backpack, water bottles, and what looked like a small camp stove. But it was the walls that told the real story. Carved into the limestone were hundreds of tally marks, organized in groups of 7. Someone had been keeping track of days. At the bottom of one wall, scratched in desperate, shaky letters, were 3 names: Marcus, Elena, Sophie Holloway. "They were alive," Amanda said softly. "They survived the initial collapse." Tyler pointed to another corner of the chamber. "There's the electronic signature we detected. It's still blinking." As the camera panned across the scene, they could see Dr. Holloway's voice recorder, sitting on a flat rock with its solar panel facing upward toward a small crack in the ceiling where minimal light filtered through. The device had been running for over 2 years, faithfully recording in an empty tomb. "How long?" Bradley's voice cracked. "How long do you think they survived?" Amanda consulted her tablet, calculating the chamber's volume and air circulation. With the oxygen coming through the rock fissures and their water supply, maybe 3 weeks. Maybe a month. The full excavation took 6 days. Working with archaeological precision, the team removed tons of rock and debris, finally creating an opening large enough for investigators to enter the chamber. Bradley was the first one down, his flashlight beam sweeping across a scene that would haunt him forever. The Holloway family had done everything right. They had rationed their food and water, created a signal system by reflecting light off the voice recorder's solar panel, and maintained hope long enough to leave behind a complete record of their final days. Marcus's research notebooks were stacked neatly in one corner, his handwriting growing shakier as the days passed. Elena's journal documented their attempts to dig their way out, to signal for help, to stay strong for Sophie. And Sophie's sketchbook was filled with drawings of the chamber, her family, and surprisingly, detailed acoustic waveforms that her father had taught her to draw. But it was the voice recorder that held the most devastating evidence. The first entry is dated the day they disappeared, Amanda reported, handling the device with reverence. It's been recording continuously for 743 days. The password protection had failed after the first week, when the device's memory filled up and began overwriting older files. What remained was a heartbreaking timeline of their final weeks, including Marcus's detailed scientific analysis of what had gone wrong. Entry 47. His recorded voice played back, weak but determined. The frequency was 127.3 Hz. I should have known, should have calculated the resonance coefficient for limestone this dense. The acoustic waves found every microfracture in the rock matrix and amplified them until... His voice broke, and Elena could be heard in the background, comforting Sophie. I finished us, Marcus continued. My arrogance, my need to test the theory. I finished my family. But the entries didn't end there. As the days stretched on, Marcus's scientific mind had continued working, documenting everything he observed about the collapse, the chamber's acoustics, and the seismic activity he could detect through the rock walls. If anyone finds this, his voice said in entry 168, now barely a whisper. The data is all here. The frequency patterns, the resonance measurements, the seismic readings. Maybe our deaths can prevent this from happening to others. The final entry was from day 197. Sophie's voice, brave and clear despite everything. This is Sophie Holloway. Mom and Dad they're sleeping now. I wanted to say that we weren't scared at the end. Dad figured out how to make the rocks safer. He said his research could save people. I hope someone finds this and uses it to help others. The recording ended there, but the device had continued running, faithfully documenting the silence that followed for another 546 days. Bradley stood in the chamber, overwhelmed by the tragedy and the family's incredible resilience. They had died, but they had also left behind something extraordinary, a complete scientific record of what had finished them, and how to prevent it from happening again. Dr. Amanda Rivers had spent sleepless nights analyzing the data from Marcus Holloway's voice recorder, and what she found changed everything she thought she knew about acoustic safety in geological research. This is unprecedented, she told the Emergency Scientific Review Board 3 weeks after the discovery. The room was packed with geologists, seismologists, and search and rescue specialists from across the country. Dr. Holloway essentially conducted the most comprehensive real-time study of acoustic-induced rockfall ever recorded. Amanda clicked to her first slide, showing Marcus's frequency measurements from that fatal morning. He was testing frequencies between 87 and 156 Hz, exactly the range we use in our current search and rescue protocols. What he discovered is that certain combinations of frequency and duration can create catastrophic resonance in limestone formations. Dr. Sarah Kim from the U.S. Geological Survey leaned forward. Are you saying our standard acoustic mapping procedures are dangerous? In specific geological conditions, yes, Amanda replied. The Holloway data shows that limestone with a moisture content above 12% and natural fracturing patterns can experience structural failure when exposed to sustained acoustic frequencies above 120 Hz for more than 90 seconds. The implications were staggering. Acoustic mapping had been used in hundreds of search and rescue operations over the past decade. How many times had rescue teams unknowingly put themselves and potential survivors at risk? There's more, Amanda continued, her voice heavy with the weight of discovery. Dr. Holloway's recordings captured seismic pre-tremors that preceded the collapse by nearly 6 hours. These micro-vibrations are completely undetectable by standard earthquake monitoring equipment, but they show up clearly in acoustic analysis. She played a section of the recording where Marcus's voice, already weak from days of captivity, explained his observations with scientific precision. The limestone matrix exhibits harmonic resonance at 127.3 Hz. Pre-failure acoustic signatures begin at T-347 minutes, characterized by subaudible frequency shifts in the 15 to 25 Hz range. Even facing death, Marcus had continued his research, documenting every detail of the disaster that claimed his family's lives. Dr. Park, Amanda's research partner, presented the next phase of their analysis. We've used the Holloway data to develop new safety protocols for acoustic geological surveys. By monitoring these pre-tremor signatures, we can now predict potential rockfall events with 89% accuracy, giving rescue teams enough warning to evacuate dangerous areas. The data had revealed something else extraordinary. In his final weeks, Marcus had figured out how to use controlled acoustic pulses to actually stabilize loose rock formations. His recordings detailed a technique using low-frequency sound waves to identify weak points in rock structures and then apply specific counter-frequencies to strengthen the molecular bonds in the stone. It's like he turned sound into a construction tool, Amanda explained. The same acoustic principles that finished his family could be used to save countless lives in the future. The review board was stunned into silence. Dr. Elizabeth Warren, the board's chair and a veteran seismologist, finally spoke. How reliable is this data? We're talking about completely revolutionizing search and rescue procedures based on recordings made by a dying man in a sealed chamber. Amanda had anticipated this question. We've spent 3 weeks independently verifying every measurement Dr. Holloway recorded. His data is not only accurate, it's more comprehensive than anything we could have collected under controlled laboratory conditions. The chamber where he died became the perfect acoustic laboratory, and his 2 years of university research gave him the expertise to document everything correctly. She paused, her voice thick with emotion. Marcus Holloway may have made a fatal mistake that cost his family their lives, but his final act was to ensure that his research would prevent similar tragedies. Every frequency measurement, every seismic reading, every observation about rock resonance, it's all here, documented with scientific rigor even as he was dying. The room remained quiet as the weight of the discovery settled over everyone present. 3 people had died in the most tragic way imaginable, but their suffering had produced scientific data that could save thousands of lives. Dr. Kim was the first to break the silence. What's our next step? Amanda looked around the room at the faces of researchers, rescue specialists, and officials who now held the responsibility of the Holloway family's legacy. We implement the new protocols immediately. We train every search and rescue team in acoustic safety procedures. And we make sure that Marcus, Elena, and Sophie Holloway didn't die for nothing. The Holloway Acoustic Safety Protocol was officially adopted 6 months later. But for Amanda, Kevin, and Tyler, who had lived with the family's story for so long, the real measure of success would be simpler. The first time a rescue team used Marcus's research to save a life, the Holloway family's sacrifice would be redeemed. 1 year later, Amanda Rivers stood at the edge of a collapsed apartment building in downtown Sacramento, watching her acoustic mapping system save its first life. The magnitude 6.2 earthquake had struck at 3:47 a.m., trapping dozens of people under tons of concrete and steel. We've got a survivor signal in Sector 7, called out Jake Morrison, the same search and rescue coordinator who had found Marcus's voice recorder 3 years earlier. Acoustic signature indicates a void space approximately 12 feet down. The rescue team moved with practiced efficiency, using the Holloway protocol to map safe drilling points while avoiding frequencies that could trigger secondary collapses. Amanda watched the display, seeing Marcus's research translated into life-saving action. Pre-tremor readings are stable, reported Tyler, now a full-fledged member of Amanda's research team. No indication of structural instability in the target zone. As the rescue drill broke through to the trapped survivor, a 7-year-old girl who had been buried for 18 hours, Amanda felt a profound sense of closure. The Holloway family's story had come full circle. Sheriff Bradley, now retired but following the rescue operations closely, joined Amanda at the command post. They would have been proud, he said quietly, watching the little girl emerge into daylight, scared but alive. Marcus always said his research was about saving lives, Amanda replied. He just never imagined the cost would be so high. The Holloway case had transformed more than just search and rescue operations. The complete acoustic data from the voice recorder had revolutionized understanding of how sound interacts with geological structures. Universities worldwide now taught Holloway resonance theory as a fundamental principle of geological acoustics. Sophie's detailed drawings of acoustic waveforms, created during her final weeks, had been particularly valuable. Her artistic representation of sound patterns had helped researchers visualize complex frequency interactions in ways that pure data couldn't convey. Several major engineering firms now employed artists to work alongside acoustic engineers, an approach dubbed the Sophie Method. Elena's journal, with its meticulous documentation of their survival efforts, had been incorporated into wilderness survival training programs. Her calm, methodical approach to rationing resources and maintaining hope under impossible circumstances became a case study in crisis psychology. But perhaps the most significant impact came from Marcus's final recordings, where he had worked through his guilt and scientific responsibility. His words had sparked a global conversation about the ethics of field research and the responsibility scientists bear for unintended consequences of their work. Every experiment carries risk, his voice said in the recording that was now played at research ethics seminars worldwide. But when we choose to test our theories in the real world, we must be prepared for the possibility that we might be wrong. The question isn't whether we should take risks in pursuit of knowledge, it's whether we're willing to accept full responsibility for the consequences. Amanda thought about those words as she watched the rescue operation continue. The Holloway Acoustic Safety Protocol had prevented 4 potential disasters in the past year alone. Research teams in Chile, Turkey, and Nepal had all aborted dangerous acoustics surveys after detecting the pre-tremor signatures that Marcus had identified. As the Sacramento rescue concluded successfully, 8 survivors recovered, no secondary casualties. Amanda received a call that brought the family's story to its final resolution. Dr. Rivers? The voice belonged to Dr. Lisa Chin, director of the National Search and Rescue Research Institute. I wanted to let you know personally. The Holloway Memorial Research Center has been approved for funding. We're breaking ground next month. The center would be built in the Sierra Nevada, just 5 miles from where the family had died. It would serve as the primary training facility for acoustic search and rescue operations, ensuring that every team member understood both the power and the dangers of sound-based rescue techniques. Amanda looked up at the evening sky, thinking about Marcus, Elena, and Sophie. They had walked into the wilderness seeking family time and scientific discovery. They had found both, though not in the way anyone could have imagined. Their story isn't ending, Amanda said to Bradley as they packed up the equipment. It's just beginning. Every life saved using their research, every disaster prevented by their data, they're all part of the Holloway legacy. 3 people had vanished into the Sierra Nevada mountains, but their voices would echo through the scientific community forever. In losing their lives, they had found immortality. In facing their greatest fear, they had given the world its greatest hope. The mountain had finally given up its secrets, and those secrets were saving lives. Sometimes the most profound discoveries come from the deepest tragedies, and the most lasting legacies are built from the most devastating losses. The Holloway family had paid the ultimate price for scientific knowledge, but their sacrifice ensured that no other family would have to pay the same cost. That was their gift to the world, and their redemption.